Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk to you about this camera right here, the Nikon D7200. I love this camera. This is the camera that I got my start on. I started taking pictures on a Nikon. It was a Nikon D40. It was one of my sister's old cameras. My sister went to school for photography, and it's something that I've always been interested in. And so when I was looking to buy my own camera, I ended up buying the Nikon D7200. And a really big thing that I want to talk with you guys about is about choosing the right camera for you. Everything that I say in this video is just my personal opinion. Take it for what it is, and you guys make your decision for you and nobody else. So the big thing I want to talk to you today is the difference between a crop sensor body and a full sensor body. So the three things that are beneficial of a full frame sensor are a broader dynamic range, better low light situation, and three is a broader field of view. The three things that are beneficial of a crop sensor camera is cost. It's gonna be cheaper. The size of the camera, if you are interested in a smaller, more compact system, crop sensor is the way to go. And three, you can get further reach with your crop sensor lenses than you can on a full frame camera. Performing arts, I do a lot of audio and lighting for different performances, whether it be a play, a musical, a dance show. I do a lot of events that are in low light situations. And so I realized pretty quickly that this crop sensor body was not giving me the image quality that I was wanting out of my pictures. So what would typically happen in these low light situations is I would have to crank my ISO up. And so I found on this camera, once I pushed it past like 1600 ISO, maybe 2000, maybe, I would start getting some pretty grainy images. I would adjust all my settings. I typically shoot in full manual, so I have control over all my settings, and my images were turning out grainy, or I wasn't able to get a fast enough shutter speed in order to kind of freeze the images that I needed to freeze. I needed to capture a moment, and I needed to freeze that moment. And I wasn't able to get that out of this camera. Another thing that this camera specifically was lacking was I also really wanted to start making videos. I have a family at home, and I really wanted to capture some moments, and I felt like some of the story was getting lost with just still images, and so I really wanted to get some solid videos. And this camera, Nikon, is notorious for not having the greatest autofocus when it comes to video. So that was lacking. Where this was really confusing for me, because when you're looking at the spec sheet and it says, oh, it does 1080 at 24 frames a second, or I'm an audio guy as well, so it was important for this to have like a microphone jack and a headphone jack so that I can monitor my audio. That was really important. This also had like an HDMI output, so I was trying to think ahead of where I might be able to utilize this. And so it had a lot of the specs of what I was looking for in a camera. And so I went ahead, and this is a killer camera. If you're doing wildlife, if you're doing sports, this is a really, really good camera. having that crop sensor can actually be a really good thing, because what happens is you can shoot further away. So if you have a 70 to 200 and you put it on this camera, you're actually getting like over 300. So you can actually get a further reach. So when you need that, having a crop sensor body um, is awesome. So I got this. I started shooting my son's sports. This camera was getting me some great shots. He plays Little League and he plays like youth soccer. So being able to be at third base line and get him all the way down playing catcher, this has the reach that this might not have. So there are definitely pros and cons to crop sensor versus full frame sensor. Cost is also a huge selling point for crop sensor bodies. So you can get the same setup. You can get a crop sensor body with, let's say, a 35 millimeter 1.8 1.8 lens, and this is great for like portraits and doing all different other things. You can really get like a really great shallow depth of field, so you get great bokeh in the background. And I really enjoyed this little combo right here. It's super small. I'm gonna put it together for you so you can see how like cute this little setup is. But I was getting some really great shots with this, and so here it is. It's not a long lens. You're not gonna impress anyone with your setup with this, but I was getting some great images with this, and the biggest selling points for me for switching to a full frame camera was I needed better performance in low light and in my ISO with the type of events that I work on. Not everybody is going to work in those events. So if you are shooting outdoors, this might not be an issue for you at all. But me shooting a lot of indoor with very low light, having that full frame sensor to be able to have a greater dynamic range in post-processing, being able to recover those shadows. So typically what I'll do is I will expose for the highlights, and then I can always bring back the shadows in post, which is much easier to do when you're dealing with a full frame sensor. It has more information. Also, shooting in RAW helps tremendously, which both of these cameras do. So I can shoot RAW in this, and I can shoot RAW in this. I remember getting my full frame camera, and I took a picture and I showed it to my wife, and doing the same kind of post-processing workflow and everything. I didn't change any of that, but she preferred the image quality on the full frame sensor over the crop sensor. One thing I really do miss about my crop sensor camera is doing sports. I'm still debating whether or not I should hold on to this camera or not, or if I should sell it. I'm still not sure. I'm not ready to give it up yet. I got this camera that we're recording on right now. I got this camera about 6 months ago, maybe a little more, and since then, I've gone through a sports season of my son's Little League games, and I was struggling. I had a 24 to 70 lens, and I was struggling sitting on the first base line trying to hit home plate. It's pretty far away, so figuring out a new lens selection This crop sensor camera came with a kit lens of 18 to 55, and it also came with a 70 to 300. So this is roughly the equivalent of like 28 millimeters to 480, 28 to 480. That's a huge range, full frame equivalent. I can almost get 500 millimeters with this guy. So that was awesome. I could hit people in the outfield. I can get like a tight shot from someone at home plate. I can get my son playing catcher. Like all the way from like the first base or third base line. It's pretty great having that reach with these crop sensor cameras. Also, crop sensor cameras are typically much cheaper than full frame cameras. So if you're on a budget and you are just getting started, get a crop sensor camera. They are great. You can do some really great macro photography with the crop sensor body. I have no real negative things to say about a crop sensor body in kind of normal situations. I do a lot of abnormal, very dark lit event photography, and I found that the low light performance in a crop sensor camera versus a full frame camera is tremendous. I can get much better image quality, a lot less grain, noise in my image with a full frame camera than I could with a crop sensor camera. So this was not an easy decision for me. I am someone who goes through the spec sheets and does my homework to figure out what works and what doesn't work and what I need and what I don't need. And I really thought that this was going to be my camera that I would have for years and years to come. It wasn't. And I had a really hard time with that. I knew I put in a little bit of money to this. I know the Nikon system. I like the Nikon system. I like the menus. I like the colors that I get from it. I like the form factor. I have a big hand, and this just feels great in my hand. I grabbed a Canon camera and I went through the menu system and I was like, what is this? I have no idea how to work any of this. And a friend of mine has an A7 III, and I held on to that camera and it just didn't work in my hands. I know any camera is going to take a little bit of a learning curve. This was a learning curve for me. Even though I knew the Nikon system, you have to learn how to use any camera that you pick up. But it was way easier for me to go with something that I knew. And that I trust. This is a company that's been making cameras for 70 plus years. That might be an issue because they might be doing the same things that they've been doing for the last 70 years. But with this Z6, I know it got a lot of criticism when it first came out, but I really enjoy the Z6. I've been taking some really good videos with it. You guys let me know. What do you guys think of the video quality of this? If anyone has any questions on what they might want to invest in, feel free to reach out. Write some comments down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.